Hey everyone, welcome to my presentation on gender and philosophy. This project was an exciting and challenging journey for me, and I want to take a moment to share why I chose this topic and the effort that went into making it. So, with that, gender is something we see debated every day in the workplace, in sports, and politics, but these debates aren't new. In fact, philosophers have been discussing gender for centuries now, shaping how we think about reality, equality, identity, and roles in society. So I wanted to explore how different philosophers such as Plato, Aristotle, David Velleman, Neil Gotanda, and Bertrand Russell have influenced our modern understanding in the role of gender. Sorry. To build this argument, to build this project, I spent a lot of time researching their texts, analyzing their arguments, and connecting them all to real world issues. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just summarizing ideas, but also actively engaging with them. Seeing how they still apply today, I also include a real life case study of the U.S. women's soccer team to show how these old debates are still shaping laws and policies right now. One of my biggest takeaways from this project is that philosophy isn't just abstract, it affects real people and the real systems that are built around the people. Even though these philosophers lived in different times, their ideas continue to influence gender roles, laws, and personal identities. My goal with this presentation is to help connect philosophy to real life that we live in and get us thinking about how we define gender today and in the future. So, with that, let's dive into some of these philosophers and their views on gender and their roles in society. So, first of all, let's get with our case study here. A major real world example of gender inequality in the U.S. is our U.S. women's national soccer team's fight for equal pay. In 2019, they sued the U.S. Soccer Federation with arguing that despite winning more championships than the men's team, they were paid significantly less. The case sparked a debate. Should we pay based on performance or traditional contracts? In 2022, they won a $24 million settlement, if I'm correct, and a new equal payment setting the precedent for gender equality in sports. I mean, other than the ruling class trying to give us propaganda on why men are better than women, I think this is a great advance in our society and something recent that happened. It's great to see women getting what men should get, even though I'm a man saying that, but everyone in the US deserves equality as a whole. So that's really important to me. Additionally, let's move on to Plato. All right. So in Plato's The Republic, he argues that women should have access to the same education and even opportunities as men. He says that if women are expected to do the same work as men, we must teach them the same things. Equality at its finest in that time period. See, I mean, that's normal for today, but in the 1500s and 1400s, that was kind of frowned upon. So, this was definitely a radical idea in ancient Greece, where women were often denied simple things such as education and public roles. Like, I can't even imagine that being a white boy from Ohio. Like, he even suggested that women could become rulers or philosopher kings if they proved themselves capable. However, though, his view was still hierarchical, where he believed that even the best people, regardless of their gender and race, should rule, ultimately giving that imperialistic Star Wars type of vibe. Like Darth Vader had the Force, so he ruled everyone and could just do all these things. So that's where I kind of see it. I don't know. It's a little funny. So while his ideas were progressive in a whole sense, they weren't entirely about gender equality as we think of it today in terms of what gender is today and how we see it. But yeah, I think his takes for that time period are pretty damn advanced and they're a-okay with me considering that was 600 plus years ago. Anyways, let's move on to Aristotle. And he had a very different view than Plato did. You normally group these two together, but they had very different viewpoints on this. Aristotle believed that in politics, his works, that he wrote that the male is superior by nature and the female is inferior. that one rules and the other is ruled, which kind of implies like misogynistic vibes, I guess. I don't know. But he believed that men were naturally more rational, while women were more emotional and needed to be guided. Because of this, he argued that women should focus on household duties such as cleaning, taking care of children, cooking, and leaving the leadership roles such as war and government roles, such with decision making, to the men of society in ancient Greece. His ideas definitely shaped Western thinking here in America for centuries, reinforcing strict gender roles that still exist today. Whether we like it or not, they do still exist. Even now, some traditional views on gender trace back to Aristotle's influence, such as women cook and clean, men do the jobs, men provide incomes. I mean, it differs household to household, but that's how it's been for most of the 19th century and probably through the 19th century, I'd say. But yeah, I think his is interesting because back then they obviously had different ways of thinking, but personally that just kind of seems weird. Like I'm not gonna if I have a girlfriend, I'm not gonna tell her, "Oh, you can't cook, you can't clean, oh, you can't work. I'm not gonna let you. I only can be the one working." I'm not gonna do that. Seems kind of weird. Anyways, let's move on to Gotanda. So Neil Gotanda wrote, "Colorblindness sustains racial subordination," which implies that ignoring race as a whole doesn't actually fix racism. Like, if I'm in a society, let's say I'm in Utah and I just see a bunch of white people all the time, I'm not just going to say, oh, black people don't exist. They aren't facing different prejudices that could occur in San Francisco or Baltimore, where there's a ton of African American population there that other places may not see. I know that genuinely doesn't describe it as a whole, but that's a little connection I made. The same applies to gender with the argument, in that just saying we don't see gender doesn't fix discrimination. It just allows it to continue in terms of gender roles, gender discrimination, what someone wants to be themselves, different things such as that. His work connects to intersectionality, which is the idea that people experience discrimination in multiple ways, not with just gender and race, but also social class, like, slaves in ancient times, slaves like merchants, kings, rulers, all that sort of stuff. And then a good example of this is like a black woman in America can face different challenges than a white woman could because of both racism and sexism that occurs in the workplace, in neighborhoods, in cities, everywhere. And these ideas are still debated today, but a great question to ask yourself and for me to ask myself is, should we aim for gender neutrality where they're equal, or should we aim to actively address it and promote equity to get up to the men's standards? Because there's still a gender discrimination aspect going on throughout the world for the most part, and especially in America today. And I think that's very important. Now, let's move on to David Velleman. Following his article, of which our class is expected to read in the future, in Kantian Ethics, he emphasizes self respect and autonomy, while he writes that respect for a person is respect for the law he gives himself. This means that we should respect people's ability to define themselves, including their gender identity. If we truly value human dignity, we should not allow people to identify, or no, we should allow people to identify as they see fit. For example, like, if I thought I was a woman, why can't I just fit into society as a whole? Like, just because people tell me not what to do and what I think I am doesn't mean, like, you know, doesn't mean that what's best for me is best for everyone else, and people wouldn't understand that. A crazy concept, I know, right? In America, crazy concept. But Kantian ethics definitely focuses on universal moral laws, which some can argue to be too rigid for modern ideas of gender, which are more fluid nowadays than they were back then, in terms of men dating men, women dating women, certain things like that, where that was seen as frowned upon, but now it's pretty open here in the US. So, how do we balance respecting autonomy with a structural moral framework? That's a great question. Um, there's always going to be a happy medium with what people want, what the individual wants, and how you can mingle that together. That's a great question. I need to reflect on that. You need to reflect on, Paul Anthony. But additionally, what do I think of what Velleman's way of putting this? Honestly, his quotes made the most sense in terms of relating gender to real world situations and experiences. Because I remember when I was a little kid, I wore pink, and my family didn't care much of it. Neither did my friends, I guess. But like some random people would mistake me as a girl when I was like 5 or 6, and I don't know, it's just kind of random, I guess. But whatever. Like you can pretty clearly tell I'm a boy. Anyways, all right. So last but not least, for the philosophers, let's move to Bertrand Russell. In his works, Russell believed that people should think critically about what they accept as their reality and reality around them. In Appearance and Reality by Bertrand Russell, he argued that what we see isn't always the full truth. This kind of connects back to the Matrix, and I like that because as we see, like in the movie Neo, he's experiencing like a corporate job, and he's in just in what he thinks is of his real world. And then Morbius comes along with the blue pill, red pill, chooses the red pill, and he gets to see what reality really is like behind the government control and the simulation and all that stuff. I do think that connects back to how we see gender and how we see, how people think about certain roles and what the government, not just the government, but society and traditional roles have imposed upon our brains and allowed us to think. We need to think personally, do I actually align with these views, or is this what I've been taught and subordinated to my whole life? You need to think about that, and I think Russell does a great job with this. He also said that a habit of finding pleasure in thought rather than in taking action is a safeguard of unwisdom and brutality on its own. I think this is a fantastic quote because me as an athlete, if I, this doesn't relate to gender, but this is a personal experience from this quote that I relate to. If I think about swimming, lifting, stretching, instead of actually doing it, it's not going to make me better. You get better and you get more flexible, you get more strength, you get better endurance by me taking action into my life. Taking action is the key to everything, going off of what Russell said, and I am a firm believer of that. This relates to gender through that many may assume gender is just about biology and science, and that's quote unquote facts. But gender, sex, and a lot of it is shaped by society around us. Like what's traditional and normal may be different than what's actually out there in different cases that exist. For example, the idea that, like I've said, pink is for girls, blue is for boys, it's something we created. This isn't just natural. It's something that the Matrix, maybe, the Matrix, the government, the traditional roles around us have created. So, yeah. Um, his ideas encourage us to definitely question these traditional gender roles and think deeply about, like in our hearts, in our brains, of why do we believe what we believe? Why don't we ever learn a different viewpoint? Why don't we argue with, why don't we smartly argue or critique other people's or find something of our own to make of it and find a new way to think? I believe that Russell's ideas allow all this, excuse me, I believe his ideas behind all of this allows the reader to think the most, and the way he goes about this is a unique way personally, and I connect to this uniquely enough. I'm sure a lot of people do, but personally, I found this one the most intriguing of what I've, accumulated through this Philosophy 100 class. Now, let's move on from that. It was great. Bertrand Russell made some great points, and I loved it. But what can we take away from everything going on here in my presentation, your feedback, what I think? These philosophers definitely had very many different takes. Or excuse me, they had very different takes on gender, but all of them shaped how we think today in our society with you, me, the whole class, the people outside the class that don't even realize that every day is philosophy. Plato argued for some level of equality, while Aristotle, on the other hand, continued to just go about traditional gender roles. We can think of that how we want. Gotanda pointed out that ignoring gender can allow discrimination to continue, and David Velleman focused on respect and autonomy, And then Russell questioned how we even define gender as a whole, which notably that's number one for me. That's a good one. Their ideas still influence modern debates. And what do you think? Who got them right? Who got them wrong? Did all of them get it right? Did all of them get it wrong? You can mix some in there. Take some time. I want you to take something away of this. This isn't just for me, but it's for you as the viewer, Paul Anthony, to take away something great from this. Now, lastly, how do these shape our future? The ideas from these philosophers still shape how we talk about gender today. Yes, crazy thought. Who would have thought? Anyways, Plato's argument for equality and Aristotle's belief in the hierarchical system are still at the heart of gender debates. Should we treat everyone the same, or are there natural differences among men and women and intersex, that sort of thing? Gotanda's ideas on colorblindness apply to gender policies. Should we ignore gender to promote fairness, or should we actively address gender-based inequalities to find that where we can meet in the middle with both men and women and keep them equal? Velleman and his Kantian ethics support the respect for people's self-definition, which connects debates over gender identity and rights, and what a confident and secure person can think of what they want to be in society. Additionally, Russell's work reminds us to question social norms in our future. Are gender roles we follow really quote unquote real? Or are they just traditions imposed by society, government, the matrix? Who knows? Now, looking ahead, I need to ask how these roles will change. I may never know, but will society become more equal, or do you think history will repeat itself with traditional ideas pushing back? Now, thank you for taking your time to view this, and I appreciate what this class has taught me over all this, but I hope you take something away from it. Think about some of the philosophers, some of the ideas behind them, what you think, what they think, where's the disconnect, and how you can branch that together to evolve.